my name is Beth Massey and welcome to the WPF Forms Over Data video series. Today I'm going to show you how you can handle and display validation errors on your WPF forms using the .NET 3.5 framework. There are 3 key steps to displaying validation messages. First, your client-side data source, the object that's holding the data on your form, needs to implement the iDataErrorInfo interface. If you're using datasets, then the data tables already handle this for you. We can then write our validation and set error messages for the properties on our business objects or the columns on the data row, depending on the data source we're using. The next thing we need to do is set up the control bindings to specify that we want to display a visual cue when our validation fails. We do this by setting the validates on data errors property. By default, WPF will place a red border around our control, but it won't actually display the message anywhere. So the last step is to set up a validation error control template so we can display the messages on our controls and make it look exactly how we want. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I've got Visual Studio 2008 open and I'm going to create a new project and select WPF application. We'll call it WPF Data Validation. Okay, so if you've been following along with this video series, you'll notice that we've got a database we've been using called OMS. It's a very simple database with 4 tables: customers, their orders, and products. I want to write some validation against the customer table here, and I want to make sure that the last name is not empty before we save our data. So what I'm going to do really quickly here is just add a new data source, which will add a new data set to our application here. Okay, so we're going to select customer data set. Okay, so as I said before, the data table will automatically implement already the iDataErrorInfo interface. So we can just go right into the dataset designer and then go ahead and view the code, and this will view our partial class code. Okay, so we're going to write some code here in the customer data table partial class. So I'm going to create a method, a little validation method called check last name. Okay, and we'll just pass in the customer row. Okay, so all we need to do is just check if row.isNull last name. Okay, so this is before any data goes into the data set, we check if it's null here, or else the row dot last name equals empty. Then we're going to go ahead and do basically call on the row this set column error. Okay, so the set column error will automatically raise the proper events to notify that the error message has been set on this column. Okay, so column index, it's a couple overloads here. The column index is one of them, or we could even just pass the actual column itself. There's last name column. I like doing that better. And we'll just say, please enter a last name. Okay, and if it's fine, if everything is good, then we'll just go ahead and say row.setColumn error again, but this time we just set the empty string. Okay, so that removes the message. Alright, so we're going to call this check from 2 different places in our data set event handlers, or data table event handlers. Okay, so I'm going to call it from the column changed event. Okay, and all we need to do here is check that if e.column, okay, so e is our event args, the column is the last name column. Okay, there we go. Then we can go ahead and say me.check last name, and we pass it the row. e.row is actually cast as just a data row. We just need to, since we want a customer row, it is a customer row, we just need to type it that way. Okay, row. And I spelled C type wrong, so I forgot it. There we go. Okay, so the other place we want to call this method is also from the table new row. Okay, so I like checking for empty values when the rows are added to the data table, because it gives a visual cue right away to the user that they need to fill out these fields, okay, when they hit new. All right, so if actually we don't need to check anything, we just say check, we just call check last name, and again pass in the row. Okay, great. So now we've got our validation all set up. Now what we need to do is create a simple form that allows us to edit this customer, and then we can set up some of our cool control templates that allow us to give us those nice visual cues to the user. All right, so let's go back to our Windows XAML and start designing our form. Okay, so let's just go ahead and expand our toolbox here. And I like to use the document outline too as a way to navigate around the form better. So you've probably seen me do this a million times now, but I'm just going to quickly design a form here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put two stack panels into two separate columns here with labels and text boxes, and then we'll put some buttons down here at the form to add and save. So I like to divide the regions here using this grid panel, and then what we can do is put stack panels right into these cells. Okay, so I'm going to make it fill up the space. Same thing over here. Okay, there we go. And I'm just going to put a couple buttons on the bottom, and we'll anchor them to the, I like to anchor them to the left hand side if I can grab it. There we go. So there you go, left hand side, or sorry, right hand side bottom, and we're gonna call this add, btn add. Okay, and then I'm gonna drop another one. Where'd my button go? Here we are. And line that up a little bit better. Okay, and we'll name this save. There we go, save. Okay, so now let's throw some labels in here. We got first name or last name, whatever we're going to do. First name, address, city, state, and zip. Okay, that's what we'll do. And then I'm just going to grab them all, and I'm going to set their width equal to auto, so it fills up the space of that stack panel, and it will stretch automatically. Okay, and then start naming these with the content. Okay, so this will be, we'll put last name first. Last name, first name, city, oh, address first. City, state, and zip. Okay, and so now we're going to throw some text boxes on this side. Last name, first name, address, city, state, and zip. And then the height of these should match the height of the label, so it lines up better. So there's our 28. Select all those, and then we do the same thing with the width. Set it to auto. Okay, the other thing I like to do is we can go back over here to our grid. Now you can see these visually here. Go to the grid and set the margin to about 6 to space out the controls a little bit, and I'm going to also space these out so they're not touching. 3 is good. Okay, so it looks pretty respectable. What I also like to do on these is also set the horizontal content alignment to the right. All right, nice. Okay, so we've got our form here. Now what we need to do is start setting up the data binding here on the text boxes, and we do that in XAML. I've showed how to do that before when we created a simple data entry form. It's basically what we're doing again. So we're going to bind to the text property, and this is going to be the last name. So let's specify our binding, the path. will equal last name. And I'm going to just take a look at my actual fields here so I get them all right, because the case does matter in XAML. Okay, so last name. And then the second one here is the first name. Okay, scroll down a little bit. I'm just going to start copying this. So address, city, state, and zip. And note that that's capital. You see that's capital here. Okay, so now I've got the binding set up. That's cool. But in order to actually have that validation, that that visual cue happen, what we do is we specify an additional property on the binding called validates on data errors. Okay, and we set that to true. So I'm going to go through and do that here. Okay. Okay, so that's what we did get to set here. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through all of them and set them all. Even though we're not actually validating, we don't have any actual validation code on any of these. I like to put this on the binding anyways, because when I go ahead and write my validation code later, it's automatically set up. It doesn't hurt to have that. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to actually write the code behind our form that loads all of the data. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and double click on our form to open up our code behind, and I can move these out of the way now. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is declare some class level variables here to hold our data set, as well as the table adapter that loads the data and a table adapter manager that will save the data. So let's just do private. I'll call it customer data as new customer data set, and then we'll private TA cust as new customer dataset table adapters, customer table adapter, and private TA manager as new customer table adapters dot table adapter manager. And I'm having these hang around because we want to save them later. Okay, so then we just go in here and me dot TA cust dot fill me dot customer data.customer. It's probably a good idea to place a parameterized query on your data sets. Don't download thousands of records onto your form, but for this example, we have a very small data set. Okay, so and then I'm just going to set the table adapter manager customer table adapter equal to this TA cust instance, so we can save it. Now here's the fun part. We're going to set the data context of the window equal to the customer data set customer table. Okay, and so now all of those controls on that form, the path is the path inside of this data source, inside this data table. So those are the fields inside. Okay, now let's go ahead and try this out actually. So go ahead and press F5. Before I hook up the buttons, let's make sure everything loads correctly. Okay, so we were just looking at the first record here. There's a lot of records in here. But if you notice, if we kind of remove this and scroll off of it or tab off of it, you'll see this like red border. Okay, so that's the default visual cue that WPF gives you when your validation fails. Okay, so when you have a validation message set, although you can't actually tell what the validation error is. Okay, so that's kind of a bummer. So we need to write a control template and use that as the template to how we want to display our messages. And we could do anything. We could display pretty pictures or icons or any of that sort of thing. We're just going to do something simple and put a tooltip on there. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's go back to our XAML. Okay, and hook up the add button, because the add button is fairly cool because we're going to see our table new row fire. And so this is pretty easy, but all I'm going to need to do is get a reference to the collection view. Okay, and set it right here. By calling the collection view source. And what this does, you know, I've kind of gone over this before, but what this does is this just gets the like the currency. It basically lets you know what row you're sitting on. Okay, that's what this collection view is. Okay, so we're going to get past the data source. There's a static method called getDefaultView, and we want to pass it the customer table. And we cast it as a collection view source. Oh, sorry, collection view. There we go. All right. Okay, so after we add, and then we say me.view, now we have a reference to that, we can say move current to last, okay, because that will be on the last row. We want to display the row that was added. Okay, so to add this, what I want to do is I want to make sure, though, that there aren't any errors on our data before we allow the user to add another row. Okay, so the way we do that little check is we can ask the data table if it has, or the data set if it has any errors. So if not me.customer.data.has errors, okay, so if there aren't any errors, we're going to go ahead and add a new row. Okay, so sorry, new customer row. And then me.customer.data.customer.add customer row. Okay. All right, so, and then we're going to do save. So I'll go back here, click on save. And what I also want to do is I want to make sure that there aren't any errors before, you know, we try and attempt to save. Okay, so we want the user to correct those errors first. So if me.customerdata.has errors, okay, then we'll just say, you know, you got to go fix these, buddy. Please correct the errors first. I don't know about yelling at them. Let's just do that. Okay. Else, we can go ahead and save. Now, make sure though that, you know, if there's changes, if, you know, me.customerdata has changes, and you only want to bother the database if we actually did anything. Okay, so if okay, now we use the manager, update all, me.customerdata is greater than 0, meaning it updated some rows somewhere. Okay. Okay. All right. Otherwise, all right. So otherwise, we'll report any problems there. Okay, cool. So now that we've got our functionality working on our form, now what we need to do is we need to define that control template so that we can make that validation message appear. But before we do that, I'm just going to set the row here on the new row, last name equal to empty there, so that our validation will display right away. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this control template. Because we want this visual validation queue, okay, the message displayed on all of the text boxes and probably most all of our controls, like whether they're combo boxes or check boxes, we probably want to display a tooltip regardless. What we can do is we can put the control template, instead of in the window that's specific to the window or specific to the text boxes here, we can stick it in the application XAML. Okay, so we can stick it in as an application resource, and this will apply to our entire application. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to paste in a template here that I already wrote. Okay, and let's just go ahead and build this. Okay, it's giving me warning, but it's actually fine. We can go ahead and close it and reopen this. Okay, so what I want to do is walk you through it here. Because we only want to display this control template when the validation fails, we need to set a style, and what we do is specify this setter property is the validation error template property. When it's requested, then this is the value, this control template, okay? And all this control template says right here is that I'm specifying a little star, okay, at the edge of the text box, and this here adorned element placeholder means that's the placeholder for the actual control. Now I made the target type of this style control. So that way what I can do down here is I can create these additional styles for the specific types of text boxes and types of controls, checkbox, combo box in this case, based on this error template. Now the part that actually displays the tooltip is here, this style trigger. So when the validation has error property, okay, this is when you implement the iDataErrorInfo has error, it returns true, then set the property tooltip equal to the validation error, okay, on the actual control. Okay, so that's what that means. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a run and see what this looks like. Alright, so now if we go back over here, you'll see that there's the little star, and there please enter a last name tooltip displays. Okay, if we try and click add, it doesn't do anything because it's not valid, so let's make it valid again. And when we click add, immediately we get please enter a last name. And if we try and save, it'll say please correct the items first. Alright, cool. Alright, save. There we go, saved. Alright, so that's how you create your own validation error template and display validation errors in WPF. So I'd like to thank you for your time. If you'd like to check out more videos, you can check MSDN Developer Centers, or for more information on WPF and WinForms, check out windowsclient.net. Thanks again.